Hey everyone, Wayne Nichols back with part 2 of my 2023 goals. If you haven't already, my first video talked about weekly investing into my M1 finance account and maximizing contributions to all of my pre-tax accounts. For this video, I want to go ahead and talk about selling covered calls for additional income. In 2022, I took on the endeavor of beginning my journey of selling options. That includes selling covered calls and selling cash secured puts. For this video though, I want to go ahead and just focus on selling covered calls and my goals of picking up 100 shares of UPS, Costco, and the Russell 2000. I'm also going to talk to you as to why I plan on selling all of my shares of Amazon. But first, I want to point out that in no shape, way, or form am I a covered call guru. Again, I just began selling covered calls in 2022. I tuned in to Brad Finn, who in my opinion is super dialed in when it comes to explaining what options are to include covered calls and cash secured puts. But in essence, you must own 100 shares of a stock before you can even consider selling covered calls. Now, in doing so, if you decide to sell a covered call, you are entering into a contract to sell your 100 shares of the stock at an agreed upon strike price by a certain date. And in doing so, you'll receive a cash premium, which is yours to keep no matter what. So whether the contract expires worthless or if your shares are called away. So let's go ahead and take a look as to how 2022 shaped out for me. You can see here, this initial map kind of breaks down both what I earned total in covered calls and what I earned total in cash secured puts. You can see here $56,000 I made in premium income in 2022. I'm rather excited about that. I think my goal though for 2023 is going to be more covered calls, less cash secured put. So let's go ahead and break down what I made just in covered calls. And you can see here, even though I only began in March of 2022, I slowly began the process. I was learning along the way. And you can see here, December is not even done yet. And just for the month of December, I've written 131 covered calls for a total amount of $14,600. Now I do expect that number to fluctuate maybe a little bit up or down. And I certainly expect, even with just 2 more days remaining in the trading year, I do believe the number of contracts will be closer to 140. So I'll be sure to post a final total in regard to cover calls as well as cash secured puts. But you can see here, my monthly average was about $2,500. And again, so far, I've made $25,000 in covered calls. So let's go ahead and talk about those goals that I have for 2023. And they're going to involve selling covered calls against these stocks that I currently own. Now, I can't, in the interest of time, break down every single covered call I sold. But what I will do, or what I've done, is I've compiled a list of these 12 stocks that I think are real winners for me moving forward. Now, you may look at these stocks and say, Wayne, why would I ever own 100 shares of this or 200 shares of this? It's really personal preference. And again, this video is for entertainment purposes. You're kind of following my journey. But again, I do feel if you were to sort of talk to me 1 year from now, right, the end of 2023, I will continue selling covered calls against these stocks. Now, this is kind of a spreadsheet, it's a spreadsheet that I've created, and it might be kind of confusing, but what I wanted to do is kind of break down how much I've made on each of these 12 stocks, and then kind of show you how long I've owned 100 shares. And that's what's really important to know. If you look at Best Buy, for example, right? Best Buy, I own 100 shares. I just picked up those 100 shares in November of 2022. So, not more than a month have I owned Best Buy, and I've already sold, right, 7 covered calls. All of them obviously expiring worthless, and I've earned a total of $189. One of the goals I want to mention as well is, if you do tune in to other YouTubers who talk about selling covered calls or cash secured puts, they may talk about the wheel strategy. My strategy though when selling covered calls is I do not want at all to part ways with my shares. So I will choose more conservative strike prices. My goal is to not have any shares called away. And everything that you see listed here, from Best Buy down to Tesla, I can tell you, I have never, not once, it's like a double negative, right? I have never had any shares called away from me. So is it luck? Is it skill? Is it a little bit of both? For me, it's the goal. I want to earn that premium, but I do not want to part ways with these shares. And I think it's also important too, if you are going to sell covered calls, you do have to realize that you could potentially lose those 100 shares. And that's why for some people, it's not worth it. They would rather hold on to the shares and hold it long term and obviously earn those dividends. Admittedly, I kind of want the best of both worlds. So let's take a look here. You can see Best Buy, $189. I've only had it for 1 month, right? So you can see why I'm fairly confident that this is going to be a big winner for me in 2023. Look at Apple. Now, Apple, I own 200 shares. And I've owned 200 shares dating back to April of this year. I've sold a total of 19 covered calls. So for a profit of $573 just in premium, that's to me is what's exciting about this whole process, is the ability to generate extra income on a stock that I have every intention of holding long term anyway. This is one that I saw, it was mentioned earlier, and that was my goal. We go back over here. My goal of picking up 100 shares of IWM, which is the Russell 2000. I already own 100 shares. I just picked up those 100 shares just a month ago. And already in just over a month, I've made $1,000. Now, you might be saying, Wayne, how the heck have you only owned IWM for 1 month and you've sold 24 covered calls? That's the nice thing about the IWM, is you can sell covered calls up to 3 times a week. So most stocks out there that you are going to sell covered calls or even cash secured puts, they have weekly options, they have monthly options, but there are stocks out there that do offer up to 3 times, even 5 days a week you can sell covered calls. So for me, I can tell you right now, just doing the math and crunching these numbers, I do expect IWM to be very profitable for me, again, with the goal of generating as much premium income as I can in 2023. Let's go ahead and take a look at the last two. You see Amazon and Tesla. And one thing I want to point out, you may look at this and say, holy heck, Wayne, you made $2,700 in premium on your Amazon shares. Well, let me just kind of point out, right, that it's not all good news when it comes to selling covered calls. And as I mentioned in my very first video, you guys get the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I can tell you right now, Amazon, as you saw here on my goal, I want to sell those shares. And the reason being is I look at these 600 shares that I own, I look at the amount of premium that I've generated, and even though I've sold a fair share of covered calls, it's just not worth it to me. I would rather own, let's say, 100 shares of Costco or 100 more shares of Target or IWM. So there are going to be some stocks that, yeah, you can sell covered calls, you can make some extra premium, but how much work do you want to put into generating that premium? And Amazon is a stock that, for me, I really thought, it was going to be a long-term hold of the stock to begin with. And for that reason alone, I'm just not interested in holding on to Amazon anymore. Now, you could argue the same thing with Tesla. And I'm going to tell you right now, I am down significantly in my Amazon position and my Tesla position. But I am going to hold on to Tesla and continue to sell covered calls, right? And it makes sense, because look at this. I own 300 shares of Tesla. I've only owned it since October of 2022. So for 2 months, I've been selling covered calls, and you can see here that I've generated just over $9,000 in premium income. So, regardless of being down in my position, and I am down, and I'm going to show you how down I am, what's exciting about earning this $9,000 in premium is that's how I was able to buy my Best Buy stocks, right? That's how I was able to, finish, and I didn't have 100 shares of Target until October of this year. So you could argue, selling covered calls is dangerous, and I don't disagree with you. But for me, what I do like is the income that I've generated. I've been able to buy quality stocks that either I want to hold long term, or I want to hold long term and sell covered calls against. But let's go ahead and see why you might have concern about me holding, and again, when I sell covered calls, one thing I didn't point out, for every 100 shares, it could be one contract. So if you have, 300 shares of a stock, you can sell 3 contracts simultaneously regarding covered calls. And so that's what I'm doing. My entry point is always going to be 100, so I can sell those covered calls. And then there are stocks out there like Apple, where I own 200 shares. That means I am able to sell 2 covered calls simultaneously. The same goes for Google. You can see Microsoft's in the mix as well. Celsius is, one of those stocks where it's a monthly, they only have monthly contracts available, but the premiums have been rather juicy. And so for me, I've held this since March, quote unquote. I've only been able to sell 11 covered calls, but look at this. I've generated, well over $1,600. And so that's exciting to me. But let's go and take a look at Amazon and Tesla. And before I show you that, I want to point out, so this is my Robinhood brokerage account. And you can see here, I've got 39 stocks in which I own at least 100 shares or more. But I want to point out that, not all stocks, not all options premium are created equal. And so, I may own 100 shares of these various stocks. It doesn't mean that I'm going to generate any decent premium. And you can see here, if we were to go this entire list, I can tell you guys, 2022 is been a learning experience and will continue to be a learning experience. Some of these stocks I really don't care to even own anymore. But I'm not just going to, sell it at a loss. And so a lot of these I'm holding on, and I'm going to be making some moves in 2023. And so I hope that you're willing to tune in, because we're going to talk about those moves as well. But let's talk about Amazon. You can see here that currently Amazon is, its share price is just over $82. Now I own 600 shares of this stock, over 600 shares, and my average cost is $126.71. Ouch, right? With a capital O. So you can see here that I am down significantly, right? 35%, nearly $27,000. Now, I'm not stressed about it. Listen, there are worse stocks that you could own 600 shares of. Amazon, in my opinion, is not one of those. But you'd better believe I'm going to be monitoring, the stock throughout the year. And my goal is, once the share price crawls back up from, $80 back to, let's say, $126, then I will make a decision to sell. Maybe I'll sell 500, maybe I'll sell all 600. But again, until the share price reaches that 126, I'm going to go ahead and sell covered calls. You do have to be careful when you sell covered calls, and you sell covered calls below your cost basis. You run that risk of those 100 shares plus being called away from you. So that's why I didn't want this to be necessarily a covered call video. There are great YouTubers out there who do a really great job breaking down some concerns that you need to have, in consideration before you sell options. But let's go ahead and finish out. And I hate to do it on a sour note, but look at this, right? Tesla currently selling for $112 a share. Guys, look at this. I am down 59%, right? I'm down nearly $50,000. It's not a good feeling, but what I will tell you is, while I am down in share price, I am going to continue selling covered calls. And really the goal is to chip away at that cost basis. And, am I optimistic that Tesla will bounce back in share price? I am. And even if I wasn't, well, at this point, I'm not going to sell those 300 shares. I'm going to continue selling covered calls until, I'm able to at least break even, if even I sell my Tesla shares at a loss. So hopefully it didn't confuse you guys too much. Hopefully you see that really There are some great quality stocks out there that you can own 100 shares, you can hold long term, and if you want, and if you know have that knowledge and firm understanding of how options tradings work, maybe you can also generate some extra income. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Remember, we're going to go ahead and knock out a few more of these videos, getting through all of my 2023 goals. So I will see you definitely on the next one. Thanks for tuning in.